Communism? Oh no, we're not communists. We're socialists around here. There's a difference, a huge one. Communism is when the state runs things. It's called the dictatorship of the proletariat. Did you know that? It has the government controlling everything, and that's how you get bureaucracy and corruption. We don't want that. No, you see, we just want a little socialism. We just want the state to own a few things. Important things, like healthcare and libraries. Did you know that libraries are socialist? It's true. See, socialism is about sharing and caring for one another. If you share things, that's socialism. I bet you think sharing is a good thing too, right? You already are a socialist. But you aren't a communist, no. I mean, who really is a communist? Communism is dead. Soviet Russia was communist and now it's gone. And now there's North Korea, China, I think. But they're about to collapse at any moment. There is no communism around here anymore. Sure, maybe there's some crazy people out there who call themselves communists. People who think Soviet Russia was an okay place. Can you imagine? 100 million people died, for crying out loud. Tankies, I tell ya. No, we're not like them. We're just socialists. We believe that people should just pay with their taxes into stuff for the greater good, like healthcare and libraries, not gulags and starvation and okay, I'm sorry, I can't do this anymore. All over you see videos and essays patiently explaining to their audience the differences between socialism and communism as if they're 9-year-old children. And you can tell they are primarily aimed at an American audience because here in Canada, for instance, we learn about this supposed distinction in the 5th grade. Vladimir Lenin, communist. New Democratic Party, socialist. But this distinction isn't real. The NDP are not socialist, and it isn't productive to tell people that it is real. In Canada, we have a robust public healthcare system. That doesn't make us socialist. In fact, it doesn't make us any more socialist than the United States is. I Sverige, var det finns många fler statliga program, det finns inte mer socialism än Amerika. Well then, if that isn't socialism, then 2 questions, Comrade Ferret, if that is your real name. First, what is it then, if not socialism, and what actually is socialism? Well, for the first question, nations with large government programs and budgets intended to benefit lower-class people are sometimes referred to as welfare states, and it may surprise you that the modern welfare state is a rather new idea. The first modern welfare system to exist in the West was in Germany in 1889. Incidentally, the Communist Manifesto was first published in Germany in 1848. Now, why did I just point that out? That didn't have anything to do with anything. Weird. Anyway, the concept of the welfare state didn't actually take root anywhere else in Europe or its former colonies until the 1930s. Oh, by the way, the world's first communist revolution in Russia took place in 1917. Just another completely unrelated fact for ya. You're welcome. So, anyway, the communist revolution in Russia was seen as an enormous success around the world and scared the absolute pants off the capitalist class. Bosses, landlords, bankers, rich people for whom the working class work, known as the bourgeoisie. Because it was these bourgeoisie who were deposed and disempowered by the revolutionaries and even killed when they fought back in the ensuing civil war in Russia. Meanwhile, the peasants and factory workers across Europe were inspired by this movement. They saw a country rising from the ashes of said civil war and immediately prioritizing care for its people. You see, the whole point of socialism, which is what the communist revolution set out to build, is collective ownership of the means of production. That is, the land, the factories, the tools, the stuff that makes the economy run. So there is no longer any need for a small upper class of people who owns and profits from these means of production. No CEOs, no board of investors, just people building and working for the greater good. And their government, therefore, working naturally in those interests, helping to plan the economy and redistribute goods without any need to appeal to the bourgeoisie. This meant an instantaneous 40-hour week. It meant full gender equality, including legalized abortion. It meant workers' compensation in the case of accidents, full medical benefits, paid vacations, workplace democracy, free education and re-education, guaranteed employment, the right to food, sick leave, days off. While workers perhaps didn't understand the ideology that made it possible, the impact of this new freedom afforded them by the communists was intimately felt, not only by the people of the new Soviet Union, but by all of Europe. By the 30s, peasants were starting to rise up in other places to organize, to try to emulate the Russian Revolution in their own way. In Scandinavia, this led to what would be called the Grand Compromise, in which peasants agreed to stop the violence in return for an implementation of a welfare model and labor market organization, but still under capitalism, still with a means of production owned by the bourgeoisie and not the working class. This would come to be known as the Nordic model. In Germany, things got more intense. Fascism arose to combat socialist elements, and the socialist parties eventually capitulated to bourgeois politics, allowing a hitherto unknown party to take over, a party deceptively calling themselves National Socialists, also known as the Nazi Party. The Nazis' sole platform at the time was to destroy communism in Germany, linking it to Jewry, and crucially, importantly to our present conversation, distinguishing it from socialism, which they said was simply any system in which people help other people. For instance, Aryans creating jobs for other Aryans. That's socialism. Not like those dirty commies who would be mercilessly executed in the coming years. And it may surprise you to learn that this is actually the origin of socialism supposedly being different from communism. Lenin, the leader of the Russian Revolution, always referred to his ideology as social democracy, with communism as its stated goal. The word communism was used to distinguish between Karl Marx's notion of early socialism and advanced socialism, which Lenin, in trying to make things easier for people to understand, would start calling socialism and communism respectively. Marx used the term communism too, but it was more or less a synonym for what he called scientific socialism. What's so scientific about it, you ask? Well, it was in contrast to the other prevailing idea of socialism at the time called utopian socialism. Utopian socialism suggests that socialism can be made successful simply through the demonstration of it as an ideal. Basically, you start a little commune, you grow your little commune, and then you show the world that your experiment works. And the world, inspired, becomes socialist. This was tried over and over again by various wealthy philosophers, and it obviously didn't work out too well. Communities planted in the middle of a capitalist world just don't tend to function in the long term. So Marx came up with scientific socialism, socialism based on material conditions. Basically, he said that because the working class is so hard done by capitalism, they will eventually rise up and seize the means of production and forcibly begin the process of building socialism. And he was right. Socialism first occurred when Russians wrested control of the means of production and the state from the bourgeoisie. Elsewhere, capitalists gave in to some of the demands of the working class who were wanting to emulate the communist revolution by giving them a welfare state. But only with Hitler did the word socialism come to be weakened to mean these welfare states as a good thing, while communism was something different and bad. And this forceful redefinition of words through Nazi propaganda was so powerful that it continues to be regurgitated even by people calling themselves left-wing today. Now, yes, words do change meaning, but socialism cannot be the welfare state. Socialism, by its very definition, is in opposition to capitalism. What is capitalism? Well, Really quick, capitalism is a system in which one class owns the means of production and employs labor as a part of that ownership in order to compete with one another and ultimately to make a profit for those individuals of that working class, which we call the bourgeoisie. Socialism that does not actively contradict this status quo is not socialism, it's capitalism with concessions. But then, what makes communism different? People will tell you it's authoritarianism, it's when socialism goes too far and you get a dictatorship. But this isn't reality. Authoritarianism is also a very new term, and you might be surprised to learn that the term authoritarian to refer to governments or countries didn't come into common parlance until after the Second World War, during the first Red Scare, specifically applied by United States propaganda to demonize the Soviet Union. However, Friedrich Engels, Karl Marx's best friend and co-writer of the Communist Manifesto, wrote, almost a century before that, in On Authority. A revolution is certainly the most authoritarian thing there is. It is the act whereby one part of the population imposes its will upon the other part by means of rifles, bayonets, and cannon. Authoritarian means, if such there be at all. And if the victorious party does not want to have fought in vain, it must maintain this rule by means of the terror which its arms inspire in the reactionists. Would the Paris Commune have lasted a single day if it had not made use of this authority of the armed people against the bourgeois? Should we not, on the contrary, reproach it for not having used it freely enough? The fact of the matter is that when you're attempting so great of a struggle as to topple not only a government but the entire ruling class of a country, it's going to be difficult. Not only are you fighting them, these people who have for hundreds of years held power over you, but their friends and sympathizers abroad will fight you and kill you and try to undo what you have accomplished. And this is what happened in the Russian Revolution. After Lenin and his Bolsheviks seized power in Russia without firing a single shot, the bourgeoisie, the monarchists, the fascists, they fought back, even invading the country from abroad. Of the roughly 1 million members of the White Army fighting Lenin's Red Army, over 200,000 were from outside what would become the Soviet Union. And even after the Russian Civil War, which would become the bloodiest civil war in world history, was won, the capitalists never let up. The new Soviet Union was immediately placed under heavy sanctions, only allowed to trade a handful of basic resources such as grain with the rest of Europe. And the Soviet Union was not recognized by the global powers at the time for nearly 16 years after its foundation. Spies, propaganda, and of course even more invasions were perpetrated against the Soviet Union for the entire duration of its existence, and eventually, in the late 1980s, the Soviet Union finally let up. Just a little bit. It stopped suppressing the bourgeoisie quite so much, started allowing some legal free markets, let people be exploited again by foreign capital and the holdout of domestic owning class. And within the decade, it was illegally, undemocratically dismantled. The Soviet Union was once more a collection of wholly separate capitalist states, and standards of living instantly plummeted. The evil communist experiment was over. The very root of working class power was gone as far as global capitalists were concerned, and now we wonder today, why, oh why do we have all these mean old conservative politicians trying to keep back public health care and dismantling our education system and hitting on welfare and worsening working conditions and paying billion-dollar bailouts for banks and blaming all of the bad stuff that comes of this on immigrants, on Muslims, on gays? If only we had a little socialism. Real socialism. Because the welfare state was only ever capitalism all along. And as soon as capitalism no longer felt threatened, it's been happy to claw back the Grand Compromise, the consolation prize given to workers in the 1930s so that they would stop fighting for freedom, so that they would stop fighting for socialism. Socialism and communism are not distinct and separate things. That's literal Nazi bullshit. And a welfare state is not the solution. It's a blinder that capitalists put on us so that we'll stop kicking them. Stop saying socialism, not communism. The construction of socialism is the hope for communism. And now that you know, if you are a socialist, if you're ready to fight against the destruction of your rights, your livelihood, your freedom, if you aren't afraid to hope for communism, for a better world, as others have done, even as capitalists fought tooth and nail to prevent it from happening, then stand up and say so. You don't need to qualify.